FactsVerse presents 4-year-old reveals father's secret at school. Teacher instantly calls authorities. Teachers are a huge part of a child's life. They're the adult that spends the most time with a child during the day. Over time, they learn to read their students' personalities, and they can tell when something's wrong. There are a few types of teachers in the world. Of course, all teachers care for their students, but some do what they need to just in order to teach them. Other teachers go above and beyond the call of duty to teach the students. And then there are a small number of teachers who will sacrifice significantly for their students, and Nancy Bluer is one of those teachers. Camden Peterson was in kindergarten and he loved school. Typically, he was a happy boy who enjoyed having fun with his friends. When Camden started acting strange, Nancy noticed it right away. She had a whole classroom full of children to concentrate on, so she decided to keep an eye on Camden over the next few days to make sure that he was all right. Over the next few days, Nancy noticed more changes in the young boy. He was usually a sociable kid, but lately he'd been keeping to himself more. The first few days, Nancy thought that maybe her student was just tired or just having a bad day. When it seemed like Camden wasn't getting any better, though, Nancy began to worry. He appeared to be distressed and distracted. He stopped playing with the other kids, and he was barely even speaking. Nancy really started to worry that something was wrong with Camden. Finally, Nancy decided to sit down with the boy to figure out what was going on. She knew something was happening, and she knew that it wasn't a classroom issue. She'd been watching how Camden was interacting with the other kids in the class to make sure that no kids were bullying him. When she saw that the problem was not school-related, she assumed something had to be going on at home. She decided to sit down with Camden and find out what was happening. When the two spoke and he told her about a problem with his father, it broke his teacher's heart. Despite the fact that the phone call could be awkward, Nancy decided to call Camden's dad. She wanted to help and knew exactly how to do so. When Nancy called Camden's father, Daryl, he was a bit surprised at getting the phone call. He had never received a call from Camden's teachers before. He assumed right away something must have happened at the school. He was worried Camden was in trouble or maybe even hurt, until Nancy told him why she was calling. She told him that his son had become withdrawn and quiet recently, and he told Nancy that his father was sick. Daryl was surprised. He had no idea that his illness was affecting his son in this way. He told Nancy that he tried to keep the details of his scary diagnosis from his son, but Camden must have overheard some conversations. He told Nancy that his kidneys were functioning below 20%. That meant he had several close calls. He was on dialysis. Finally, Nancy understood why Camden was so upset. Camden and Daryl's situation was weighing on Nancy's mind. She was worried about what would happen to Camden if his father's kidneys failed completely. Daryl was the only person that Camden had, and losing him would change Camden's life forever. So finally, Nancy made a decision. She decided to call the authorities and see if she would be a suitable kidney donor for Daryl. She went to the hospital to talk to a doctor to learn about kidney donation. When Nancy spoke to the doctor, she was told that she would have to go through plenty of tests to make sure that physically she could donate a kidney. First, she was told that she would have to have tests to make sure that she was a match for Daryl, and that meant that she needed to match his blood type and get a blood tissue test. If Nancy's kidneys were not a perfect match for Daryl's, he would reject the organ. Next, they would have to test her kidney function to make sure that both of her kidneys were functioning properly. And they also had to make sure that Nancy was strong enough to go through the procedure. She had to have a routine physical, an electrocardiogram, a chest X-ray, a urine test, and a computed tomography of her kidney. Additional blood tests were essential as well. If she didn't pass any of these tests, she would not be able to donate. Next, she had to go through psychological testing. The doctors wanted to make sure that she was mentally competent enough to make an informed decision about making a kidney donation. They needed to make sure she understood what kidney donations really entailed. The operation itself is major surgery, and complications are possible. Also, having just one kidney would require Nancy to make some permanent changes in her life. The doctors needed to be sure Nancy understood all of these things before donating her kidney. After passing all the tests and hearing that she was a suitable donor, it was time to call Daryl to make him an offer. Nancy called Daryl and she offered him the most beautiful gift he could ever have imagined. She told him that she wanted to give him one of her kidneys. Daryl didn't know what to think. He did have some friends and family who offered a kidney, but, well, sadly they weren't matches. He also had a few friends, and they never did offer at all. So when his son's kindergarten teacher called and offered, he didn't know what to think. At first he told her that he just couldn't ask her to do something so incredible. Nancy told him that she would not take no for an answer. She let him know that she'd already gone through all of the necessary testing, and she was a match. Darold couldn't believe she'd already done all of this before ever offering her kidney or talking to him about it. He had to think about it for a while, but then he thought about his son Camden. If he refused Nancy's incredible offer, his son could end up growing up without a father. So Darold agreed to take Nancy up on her offer, and to show his appreciation, he sent Nancy flowers at the school to express his thanks. Finally, all the tests were completed, the paperwork was filled out, and it was time for Nancy to do the donation. On the way to the hospital, Darold started having some second thoughts. He was worried that Nancy's health would fail after he received her kidney, and he'd feel responsible for the rest of her life. At the hospital, he told Nancy about his fears. She told him not to worry, and she was determined to help him and his family, so he agreed to go ahead with the surgery. On the day of the operation, Darold's whole family was there to see him through it. When Nancy arrived, they all told her how thankful they were for her. They'd been searching for a donor for a long time, and Darold had been going through a lot mentally and physically. Going through dialysis several times a week was hard enough, but the idea of leaving his family behind was more than he could bear. Now that Nancy was going to give him a kidney, his suffering was going to end. His family couldn't have been more thankful that finally Darold's suffering was coming to an end. The transplant team consisted of Dr. Alan Reed, Dr. Zoe Stewart-Lewis, and Dr. Daniel Katz. They were the best transplant doctors in the business, and they were sure the surgery would be a success. They knew that there were risks involved, but they'd already discussed this with both of their patients, and both patients agreed to go ahead with the surgery. While the family waited nervously, the doctors went to work. The nurses stayed with the family and answered all their questions, trying to keep them calm. And finally, the doctors came out into the waiting room with smiles on their faces. The surgery was a success. When Nancy woke up, she was surrounded by Darold's family. They wanted to be the first ones to thank her for the sacrifice that she'd made to save Darold's life. Darold, of course, was also thankful. He said that she'd given him and his new son a new opportunity at life. He says he couldn't find the words to express the gratitude that he and his family had for her selfless and brave act. The family says Nancy will be a part of their family for the rest of their lives. They'd always make sure that she was taken care of, and it was the least she could do. He says there really is no way to pay a person for saving your life. When Nancy healed from her surgery, she went back to work, and right away she noticed a change in Camden. He was acting like his old self again, playing with his friends and participating in class. She was so happy that he was happy again. Seeing him happy made her realize that she had made the right decision regarding the kidney donation. Nancy and Darold wanted to raise awareness for organ donation, so they reached out to the local news sources to tell the story. The news channels were more than happy to do a story on them. When the reporter asked Nancy what made her think about becoming a donor in the first place, she mentioned her coworker. A few years earlier, one of her coworkers had donated a kidney to a member of her church. She says that when she heard about Camden's father, she knew what she had to do. Ever since her coworker donated a kidney, donating an organ herself was on her bucket list. Darold told the reporter that Nancy gave him something nobody ever could – a chance. Thanks to her, he says that he'll be able to watch his child grow up. He'll have the opportunity to do some good himself. He says Nancy's gift inspired him to do something nice for another person. Darold told the reporter that he would use his second chance at life to try and change another person's life the way Nancy changed his. When the local news ran the story, they also posted it on their Facebook page, and it wasn't long before that story went viral. People from all over the world were commenting on the story, telling Nancy what a brave, kind, and selfless person she was. Many people commented that Nancy's incredible gift inspired them to do the same. This was precisely what Nancy and Darold were hoping would happen. They just wanted people to consider becoming organ donors themselves. Today Nancy's back at work. She feels terrific every time she sees Camden smiling. Darold is also doing great, and he no longer needs dialysis several times a week. He's able to make plans for his future. Before the surgery, he was afraid to even think about the future because he wasn't sure if he had a future. Now he's healthy. He has things to look forward to. Nancy's generous gift has changed the lives of so many people, but none more than Daryl's and Camden's. Daryl says having a new lease on life is the best gift he could ever hope to receive. If this story has touched you, how about considering becoming an organ donor yourself? You can learn more about it at organdonor.gov or donatelife.net. And subscribe for more.